Okay, we're going to get started. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating this morning. We're going to talk about the upcoming assignment. Is there anything else that anybody would like to talk about or address? Okay, so you've been reading, you just started reading the Art and Revolution book, David Craven. And you'll see that the perspective in this book is a little different than the other books, that not all the authors agree. David Craven is an art historian, but he's looking more at the political history. He's looking at the way that Latin American art formed a part of a cultural resistance, a political resistance, how the concepts of revolution became embedded in art, and how these revolutions impacted art movements, and how the art that came out of these movements was so important in understanding these movements for political change. So you'll see Craven's work a little different. I didn't assign you the first chapter, which was kind of a definition of revolution, because it's slightly confusing. But the rest of it, I think, has a lot of really good analysis, and this would be a good place to look, especially for this coming assignment. So let's take a look at the assignment here. Let me get back to the... So the assignment, here it is. Do you see the assignment here?
Yes.
Can someone with a microphone say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, describe the narrative that the artist proposes in one of the Mexican murals we're studying. What themes did the artist highlight in this mural? Describe how they use images to propose an idea. Is there a political message embedded in the mural? Historical references? What about the role of women in the mural? Does this reflect a change in the ways women have been depicted in society? Murals, Frida doesn't count. So what I'm saying here is that we're looking at murals. So you'll have, if people want to write about Frida Kahlo, you'll have an opportunity later to do that. But this would not be the place, because her work, while a very important statement, really doesn't reflect the mural movement, which is what we're talking about right now. So is that clear?
Yes.
Somebody give me a yes,
Yes.
just so I know that you're out there. Anybody out there?
Yes.
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 Yep.
Can someone just type yes or say yes so I know that you're out there? Okay, so let's look at how we would do this. So how would you find the narrative in a mural? What is the narrative in a mural? Now, this is going to be a very subjective assignment. There's kind of no right and wrong answer. The idea is to just kind of dig in and look at a mural and look at the elements. What are the things that you might take into account? Well, where it's placed, right? The placement of the mural, the placement in terms of the physical location of the mural might be relevant. We could look at the historical circumstances that it's painted in, like how it was commissioned or who commissioned it and where it was. We can look at the aesthetics, kind of the colors, the tone that the artist is setting. Is it optimistic and light, or is it dark? We can look at the historical situation that is being depicted, the events. We can look at the people, how are they relevant? the juxtaposition of images, all of these things to kind of determine that. So let's take a look at a mural, and let's see. Let's look at this mural. And there, can you see it?
Yes.
So we're looking at the Man of the Crossroads that was originally painted at the Rockefeller Center. Now, this is a very controversial mural because, as you know, it was destroyed supposedly because of the portrait of Lenin that you see there, and was later repainted at the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico City. Very similar, based on a photograph that Lucien Bloch, one of de Rivera's assistants, took. He was able to recreate this mural. So what do we see here? Man at the crossroads. We see in the middle a man at the crossroads. And what is he harnessing? He's talking about, he represents technology and the use of science, the scientific breakthroughs. And we can see the 20th century was a time of huge change as the emergence of new technologies really changed the way people lived. We see the breaking down of atoms, hybrid plants, which allowed for greater productivity, the exploration of space and air travel. All of these things represented, harnessed by a man, controller of the universe, right? The man at the center of it. Now, we can see that in many of Rivera's paintings, he worshipped technology and had great faith in the promise of what technology could bring to the human race, to humankind, in solving many of the problems. And this is part of also his Marxist vision, because one of the things that Marx talked about was how in the communist society, kind of the communist utopia, that the development of technology that would be harnessed by capitalism, again, the forces of capitalism unleashed these scientific explorations and, again, these technological changes, but would eventually fall into as the society progressed, would eventually fall into the hands of the people. So the crossroads is, again, possibly looking at the way that technology could be used. Will it be used for profit, or will it be used to benefit humanity? We can see the two opposing forces, one on either side. The socialist revolution, we can see women empowered on the right side. We see the women being active at the forefront of the struggle as workers, soldiers, participants. And in the other side, we see women as observers. We see them playing cards, kind of a decadent party atmosphere. And we see, again, at the bottom on the left-hand side, we see a child kind of crawling around on the floor. On the other side, we see a headless statue. On one side, a statue of Zeus, and on the other side, a headless statue. And maybe this represents the death of superstition. Again, this is kind of an anti-religious statement, possibly, where Zeus on one side, again, who hurls lightning bolts and controls the destiny of humans. On the other side, there's a headless statue, kind of a headless God, the people determining their own destiny. So another important figure we see in this, we see Lenin surrounded by workers, a diverse, notice the ethnic mixture of the workers, a diverse group of workers. They're holding hands. Lenin as the interpreter of Marx, who took Marx's work and interpreted it to provide the basis of the Communist Party and the founding of the Soviet Union. Marx had proposed that the demise of capitalism would come in the industrial countries, the industrialized countries, where the hyper exploitation of workers would get to the point where these industrial workers would rise up, as factory owners couldn't cut costs anywhere in the production line except wages, and eventually the exploitation of workers would lead, the competition between capitalists would lead to a workers' revolution. But what happened historically is that the revolutions didn't happen in the industrialized countries. Capitalism was more fluid. The capitalists were able to negotiate with unions, the beginning of some government intervention into the economy. And the revolutions occurred in Russia, in Mexico, in China, and in other countries. In Russia, the difference in Mexico, there was no enlightened group of leaders to take control. Emiliano Zapata and Pancho Villa, revolutionary leaders who were capable of taking power, had really no plan for seizing the reins of the government, for actually taking control and for implementing their policies on a national level. So we see members of the elite stepping up in Mexico, different groups and different interest groups stepping up and taking control. But in the Soviet Union, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who you see pictured here, uses his new interpretation of Marxism to say that, well, possibly the workers' revolution will not happen in the industrialized countries, because Marx believed that in the industrialized countries, then that the means of production, the advance of technology, would allow for the implementation of a more equitable distribution of land and resources, because the technology was in place to free many people of the menial tasks, and to kind of make this hyper exploitation in capitalism, to turn this around and to try to use technology to free people from doing these menial tasks, hard work and dangerous occupations. So Lenin argues that a small group of enlightened intellectuals will lead the people, what he called the vanguard. And in Russia, in the 10 days after the uprising, we see the uprising against the Tsar in 1917 was a massive uprising of workers, of farmers, peasants, soldiers, small business people, people from all across society rose up against the Tsar. And there were many competing factions competing to take power. And Lenin led the Bolshevik faction, which proposed using Marx's ideas. And how do we make a more equitable society? Well, let's get rid of private property. Let's rethink this whole proposition. Also, we see in this mural a picture of Leon Trotsky. He's on the right side with white hair, wearing glasses, holding up a flag. Leon Trotsky was the founder, and there's Karl Marx and Engels. And Leon Trotsky was the founder of the Red Army, who led the fight against fascism, a brilliant orator, and one of the original leaders of the Russian Revolution. So Trotsky's figure here also is an important statement, because Rivera began to follow Trotsky and actually invited him to Mexico. So in this mural, we see many things going on. So you can look at kind of describing some of the scenes, some of the elements here, and bring it together and show how this created a narrative. Here's another important one, is Orozco's Gods of the Modern World. This is painted at Dartmouth College. Now, what do you think that the administration of Dartmouth College thought about this? Here are professors, academics, and leaning over a corpse with skeletons and bottles and on top of books. Well, this is kind of about dead ideas and about kind of the stagnation of academia and the university. So you can see the red color in the background. It's kind of a flaming hell, not exactly a tribute to the halls of learning. Notice the door underneath. So he used, again, the space to create part of the mural, that it becomes part of the mural. So is this clear? Anybody have any comments, questions about what to do and how to do it?
So the way you broke down explain the mural, is that you wanted to do an essay? Exactly how you are breaking down and describing it?
Yeah, so what I'd like you to do is to look at the mural and describe kind of the context of the mural, right? The historical context. The placement would be important, right? So the Man at the Crossroads mural and the Dartmouth mural, the place that they're painted in is very important to the meaning, right? Mm-hmm. The Dartmouth mural, if that was painted somewhere else, it would probably not be have such an impact, right? But here it is painted in a college, and it's obviously criticizing what's going on all around it, right? So the context would be important. You could look at, some of the ideas. Now, where would you find information about this? How would you go about doing this? You could base it on your own viewing of it, your own analysis, but you could also look in the books that there's many analysis of these same murals in all of these books. And Rivera himself in the My Art, My Life also makes comments about his murals, about what he intended and what he was trying to say. So these are the places to look. Now, what I would ask you to do here is to try to put yourself in the shoes of the muralist and the shoes of the viewer, so that what is the muralist trying to say? How are they doing? How are they using these figures? So, why did he put, for instance, in the Man at the Crossroads, why is Lenin there? Why is Trotsky there? Why did he put them in that mural? Couldn't he have put some figure that would have represented a leader? Why did he specifically put them in there? And I think, especially in Rockefeller Center, this is kind of the temple of capitalism. He did this to kind of poke at them a little bit and to show his resistance. And the mural was torn down because of it. But in this debate, he also provoked an important discussion. So I guess he thought he could get away with it because the Rockefellers originally approved the design, but they hadn't noticed Lenin in the picture. And I think they said that was the thing that set them off. But also the presence of Trotsky must have also upset Stalin, Joseph Stalin. Trotsky, who was the founder of the Red Army, was expelled by Stalin when Lenin passed away. When Lenin left in 1924, there was a vying for power between different factions, and Joseph Stalin takes charge and began to marginalize Trotsky, eventually having him deported and exiled. And Trotsky ends up in Mexico, invited by Rivera. And Trotsky's idea was that socialism couldn't work in one country unless there was a socialist revolution all over the world, because the forces of capitalism were too powerful. And Trotsky starts his own Fourth International, kind of an alternative to the Communist Party, an alternative communist view, which had a lot of support and the support of Rivera in Mexico. So these are things you could talk about, right? You could look at the different aspects, the way he depicts the socialist society and the capitalist society. The depiction of women, the role of women in the forefront. You can look at this. So you can pick any of the murals, and please pick a mural. And the reason I'm saying this and not a painting is the murals are public art with a very clear, explicit message and a purpose, where the easel paintings were not as broad, and the messages were more subjective and more subtle. So no Frida for this assignment. But you can look at some of the other murals. I put there Aurora Reyes, a woman muralist who did important work, another muralist. So any of the murals from this time. So in terms of grading this, since it's so subjective, I'm going to be very lenient in this, and I just want you to make a clear argument and be brave. Don't be afraid to make a radical interpretation that goes against everything that they've seen, or your own interpretation of it. That you might contrast some of the ones in the book. What do you see in it today, which might be different than what people saw in the 1930s? So this is something you could use. So is that clear? Anybody have? Okay. Anything else anybody like to bring up? Any topics? Now, go ahead. Somebody talking? No. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is, let's say in the first assignment, you're not happy with your grade. Let's say you thought that you could have done better, or the assessment was unfair. If that's the case, let me know, and I'll give you a chance to rewrite the first assignment. Okay, and hopefully the comments were on the assignment were clear enough so you can do that, because I know it's hard to know what somebody wants right here, just out of the blue. You're writing these assignments. So the first assignment, a lot of people kind of slipped up a little bit in that they weren't specifically citing Marx and explaining how it was viewed in the mural, and then also taking into account the Mexican Revolution, which was not a communist revolution at all. In fact, the Communist parties founded after the revolution, that there was very little influence of Marxism within the revolution, but it wasn't that the revolution was an uprising that Marx predicted, right? That Marx talked about, so that these forces that Marx talked about were in play. So anyway, it's complicated, and I appreciate everybody's effort. So so we're working on it. This slowed me down a little bit, but hopefully by the end of today or tomorrow, all the grades will be done. Unfortunately, we started at A, so people who were lowered, we started at A and at Z, so people in the middle are still not graded. So it will be very soon. Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, great. Well, I appreciate your time in doing this, and I hope this is helpful and useful. And I'm open to talking to you, and if you want extra credit or something like that, I want you to succeed. I want you to do well in this course, and I'm going to give you every opportunity to do that. Okay, so you just need to talk to me, and I'm open to it. So any other comments, questions? Okay, I'm going to sign out then, and thank you for coming, and I really appreciate your participation. It means a lot to me that people care. Okay, thanks.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, see you next week.